The champagne glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the marble floor, sending crystalline shards in every direction. Around me, the anniversary party continued in full swing, but all I could focus on was the sight before me, my husband. Daniel pressed against the wall of the hallway, his sister's hands on his chest, her lips inches from his. I stood frozen, the happy buzz from 3 glasses of champagne instantly evaporating as I watched Vanessa whisper something in Daniel's ear, her hand sliding down his arm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rachel, are you okay? Olivia's voice barely registered as I stared at the scene unfolding just beyond the doorway, partially hidden from the rest of our guests, but in plain view from where I stood. I had spent weeks planning our 5th anniversary, party at the Terrace, Riverside's most elegant restaurant. Everything was perfect, from the delicate flower arrangements to the custom playlist featuring songs from our wedding. Surrounded by family and friends, with Daniel giving a heartfelt toast about our journey together, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. That was until I excused myself to freshen up and took a wrong turn, returning to the main room. I backed, away from the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest, desperate not to be seen. My sister-in-law Vanessa had always been overly affectionate with Daniel, but this crossed every line. Daniel seemed uncomfortable, shifting away from her, but he wasn't pushing her away forcefully enough for my liking. "Rachel, you've gone white as a sheet," Olivia whispered, gripping my elbow and steering me away from the mess of broken glass. She followed my gaze and her eyes widened. "Oh my God, is that Vanessa?" I confirmed, my voice barely audible. "With Daniel." Olivia's expression hardened. "That witch. I always knew she had a thing for him. Rachel, you need to confront them right now." But I couldn't move. The room was spinning slightly, faces of our guests blurring together. My mother-in-law Patricia was cutting the anniversary cake, calling for us. "Where's the happy couple? Daniel? Rachel?" Daniel appeared then, straightening his tie, a forced smile on his face. Vanessa followed moments later, her crimson lipstick slightly smudged, a self-satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. When she caught my eye across the room, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, she raised her champagne glass in a mock toast. "There you are!" Patricia's voice rang out. "Come on, it's cake time!" Daniel made his way to my side, his hand finding the small of my back. "Hey, where did you disappear to?" he asked, his voice casual but with an undercurrent of tension. I could smell Vanessa's distinctive perfume on his collar. "I think you know exactly where I was," I replied quietly, maintaining my smile for our guests while my insides twisted with hurt and rage. Daniel's hand tensed against my back. "Rachel, whatever you think you saw—" "Not here," I cut him off, my voice low. "We're not doing this here." We made it through the cake cutting, smiling for photos while I died inside. Vanessa hovered nearby, accepting congratulations for planning such a wonderful celebration for her brother and me, though I had done most of the work myself. She kept touching Daniel's arm, standing too close, laughing too loudly at his comments. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Olivia pulled me aside. "What are you going to do?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I don't know yet, but I need answers." "Want me to stay with you tonight? Daniel can sleep on the couch at his parents' place for all I care." I shook my head. "No, this is between Daniel and me. And Vanessa," I added, watching as she helped Patricia collect gift bags, playing the dutiful daughter. Later, as Daniel and I drove home in tense silence, I could feel the questions and accusations building inside me, a pressure cooker ready to explode. When we finally entered our apartment, I couldn't hold back anymore. "What the hell was that? Tonight?" I demanded, tossing my purse onto the couch. Daniel loosened his tie, avoiding my gaze. What are you talking about? Don't. Don't insult my intelligence, Daniel. I saw you and Vanessa in the hallway. His face paled slightly. Rachel, that wasn't what it looked like. Vanessa was drunk. She was saying crazy things, and I was trying to calm her down. By letting her press herself against you? By letting her whisper in your ear and touch you like that? My voice rose with each question. She caught me off guard. I was trying to extract myself from the situation without causing a scene at our anniversary party, Daniel protested, running a hand through his hair in frustration. How considerate of you, I replied, the sarcasm thick in my voice. And has Vanessa caught you off guard before? Is this a regular occurrence I should know about? Daniel's expression hardened. You're being ridiculous. Vanessa is my sister, and that makes her behavior appropriate? That makes your response acceptable? I didn't respond to her. I was pushing her away when you saw us. Not hard enough, I shouted, tears finally spilling over. Not nearly hard enough, Daniel. We argued for hours, going in circles. Daniel insisted nothing had happened, that Vanessa had been inappropriate, but he had rebuffed her advances. I wanted to believe him, but the image of them together kept flashing in my mind, along with 100 small moments over the years. Vanessa's lingering hugs, her backhanded compliments to me, her constant reminiscing about Daniel's ex-girlfriends. I need some air, I finally said, grabbing my jacket. Rachel, it's 2 a.m. Where are you going? Daniel's voice was tinged with alarm. I don't know. Just away from here. Away from you. I spent the night driving aimlessly around Riverside, finally parking at a 24-hour diner where I nursed a cup of coffee until dawn. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from Daniel, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. By morning, exhaustion had dulled my rage, leaving a hollow ache in its place. When I returned home, I found Daniel asleep on the couch, his phone clutched in his hand. I stood watching him for a moment, this man I had loved for 6 years, wondering if I still knew him at all. The buzzing of my own phone startled me. It was Olivia. How are you holding up? She asked without preamble. I don't know, I admitted, moving to the kitchen to speak quietly. We fought all night. He swears nothing happened, that Vanessa was drunk and he was pushing her away. Do you believe him? I hesitated. I want to, but there's just something off about the whole situation. And why would Vanessa do that? She's always been competitive with me, but this crosses a line. Rachel, Olivia's voice turned serious. There's something you should know. I didn't want to make things worse last night, but I overheard Vanessa talking to Patricia in the bathroom. She was saying something about how Daniel deserved better, how he'd made a mistake marrying you. My hand tightened around the phone. She said what? Patricia told her to be quiet, that someone might hear, but she didn't exactly disagree. I'm sorry, Rachel. I should have told you sooner. The betrayal cut deep. Not just from Vanessa, but from Patricia too. The woman who had welcomed me into the family with open arms, or so I'd thought. What are you going to do? Olivia asked. I looked over at Daniel, still asleep on the couch, unaware that our life together was crumbling. I don't know yet, but I need to figure out exactly what's going on with the Wilson family. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After hanging up, I made a decision. Instead of waking Daniel for another circular argument, I wrote a note. Gone to my mother's. Need time to think. Please don't call. I packed a small bag, called my boss to request a few personal days, and left before Daniel woke up. As I pulled out of our driveway, I caught sight of Vanessa's red sports car turning onto our street. She was coming to our house. At 7 a.m., after what happened last night, something snapped inside me. I parked a block away and watched as she knocked on our door. After a minute, Daniel answered, looking disheveled and distressed. Vanessa immediately threw her arms around him and they disappeared inside. My hands shook as I started the car again. Whatever explanation Daniel had given me last night was clearly a lie. My sister-in-law was in my house with my husband the morning after I caught her trying to seduce him, and he had let her in. I drove to my mother's house in a daze, tears blurring the familiar route. Diane Taylor had always been my rock, the person I turned to when life became too complicated. When I arrived, puffy-eyed and heartbroken, she didn't ask questions. She simply opened her arms. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured into my hair as I broke down. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." Between sobs, I told her everything: the anniversary party, catching Vanessa with Daniel, our fight, and finally, seeing Vanessa enter our house this morning. Mom's face hardened with each detail. "I never trusted that family," she said finally. "Too perfect on the surface. And that Vanessa, always looking down her nose at everyone." "What do I do, Mom?" I asked, feeling like a lost child rather than a 32-year-old woman. "First, you rest. You've been up all night. Then we think clearly about this. If Daniel is involved with Vanessa," she grimaced at the thought, "then you need to protect yourself. Legally, financially, emotionally." I nodded, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming me. Mom showed me to my old bedroom, unchanged since high school, and I collapsed onto the familiar bed. As I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed again. Daniel, calling for the 20th time. I switched it off and surrendered to unconsciousness. When I woke hours later, the afternoon sun was streaming through the curtains. For a blissful moment, I forgot everything. Then reality crashed back, bringing fresh waves of pain. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how my seemingly perfect life had shattered in a single evening. A soft knock at the door roused me from my thoughts. Mom entered with a cup of tea and a determined expression. "Tyler from your office called the house phone. He said your cell is going straight to voicemail. There's a client emergency." Work, real life. It seemed so distant now. "I'll call him back," I sighed, sitting up. "Also," Mom hesitated, "Daniel came by about an hour ago." My head snapped up. "What? What did he say?" "He wanted to see you. I told him you were resting and that he should respect your wish for space." She sat beside me on the bed. "Rachel, he seemed genuinely upset." "Did Vanessa come with him?" I asked bitterly. "No, he was alone." Mom squeezed my hand. "Listen, I'm not defending him, but maybe you should hear what he has to say when you're ready." I sipped the tea, letting its warmth spread through me. "I will, but not yet. First, I need to understand what I'm dealing with." After calling Tyler and handling the work crisis remotely, I found myself restlessly pacing my mother's living room. Being idle gave my mind too much freedom to replay the images from last night. "I need to do something, Mom. I can't just hide here." Mom looked up from her crossword puzzle. "What did you have in mind?" "I need to know the truth about Daniel and Vanessa, about what the whole Wilson family thinks of me." I chewed my lip thoughtfully. "Patricia and Robert are hosting that charity dinner tonight at their house. Everyone will be there." "Rachel," Mom's tone was warning, "confronting them in public might not be the best approach." "I'm not going to confront anyone. I'm just going to observe. See how they act around each other when they think I'm not watching." I reached for my phone. "I'm going to call Grace." Grace Chen had been friends with the Wilson family for years. She was kind and observant, and most importantly, she owed me a favor after I helped her daughter land an internship at my agency. "Grace, it's Rachel. I need your help with something." An hour later, I was in Grace's car, heading to the Wilson estate. The plan was simple. I would stay out of sight while Grace kept her eyes and ears open, reporting back to me about any interactions between Daniel and Vanessa. "Are you sure about this?" Grace asked, glancing at me with concern. "It feels a bit extreme." "I need to know, Grace. I can't move forward without the truth." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'll text you if I see anything suspicious." I waited in Grace's car, parked down the street from the Wilson mansion. From there, I could see guests arriving, local politicians, business associates, friends of the family. Daniel arrived alone, looking somber in his suit. Vanessa came, shortly after, wearing a dress that was far too revealing for a family charity event. My phone buzzed with updates from Grace. "Daniel keeping to himself, looks miserable." Vanessa trying to talk to him, he's avoiding her. "Patricia asked where you were. Daniel said you weren't feeling well." For 2 hours, nothing seemed particularly damning. Then, "Come to the East Garden path. Now, use the side gate." Heart pounding, I slipped out of the car and made my way to the indicated spot. Grace was waiting, her expression grave. "They're in Robert's study. The window is open. You can hear everything." I crept closer, staying hidden behind a large hydrangea bush. Voices drifted out. Daniel's, tight with anger, and Vanessa's, defensive and shrill. "You need to stop this, Vanessa. What you did last night was completely inappropriate." "Oh, please. You enjoyed it. You've always enjoyed our little moments." "There are no little moments. You're my sister, for God's sake. And I love Rachel." Vanessa laughed, a brittle sound. "Rachel is boring, Daniel. She always has been. You settled for her because she was safe. We both know you wanted something more exciting." "That's not true. You need to accept that I love my wife and stop this destructive behavior." "Destructive? I'm trying to save you from a mediocre life." Mom agrees with me. She's never thought Rachel was good enough for you. My breath caught in my throat. "Patricia too?" "Mom has nothing to do with this," Daniel snapped. "And neither do you. My marriage is none of your business." "It is when you're clearly unhappy. When was the last time you smiled, really smiled, before I came back to town? Rachel's dragging you down and everyone can see it except you." "That's enough, Vanessa. I want you to leave Rachel alone. In fact, I think it's best if you and I keep our distance for a while." "You don't mean that." Vanessa's voice turned wheedling. "We're family. We've always been close. Not like this, never like this. What you're suggesting, it's wrong on every level." I heard movement, and then Daniel appeared at the study door, his face set in hard lines. Vanessa followed, grabbing his arm. "Daniel, wait." He shook her off. "No, I'm going to find Rachel and fix the damage you've caused. We're done here." As Daniel strode away, Vanessa stood alone, her expression morphing from pleading to cold fury. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "Mom, we have a problem. Daniel's being difficult." "Yes, about Rachel." "No, I tried that." "I think we need to move to Plan B." "Plan B? What were they plotting?" I'd heard enough. Careful to remain unseen. I made my way back to Grace's car, my mind racing. Daniel's words had given me hope. He'd rejected Vanessa, defended our marriage. But what was this Plan B Vanessa had mentioned to Patricia? Grace found me waiting in the car, my hands shaking. "What did you hear?" she asked, sliding into the driver's seat. Enough to know that Daniel was telling the truth about rejecting Vanessa, but also that she and Patricia have been plotting against me somehow. I ran a hand through my hair. "I need to figure out what they're planning." Grace started the car, concern etched on her face. "Rachel, maybe you should talk to Daniel directly. Tell him what you heard." I shook my head. "Not yet. If I tell him now, Patricia and Vanessa will just deny everything. I need proof." After Grace dropped me back at my mother's house, I finally turned my phone back on. 27 missed calls from Daniel, 5 from Patricia, and 1 from Robert. numerous text messages, all expressing concern about my whereabouts. The last text from Daniel caught my attention. "Rachel, please call me. I know how bad it looked, but I swear to you, I pushed Vanessa away. I've told her to stay away from us. I love you. Only you. Please come home." I wanted to believe him. After what I'd overheard, I was inclined to. But the mention of Plan B still troubled me. What were Patricia and Vanessa up to? As I was contemplating my next move, an email notification appeared on my screen. It was from Patricia, sent to the entire family. "In light of recent tensions, Robert and I think it would be beneficial for the whole family to spend the weekend at Cedar Lake Resort. We've booked the entire North Lodge. This will give us all a chance to reconnect and heal as a family. No excuses. We expect everyone there, including you, Rachel dear." A family retreat. Now? It seemed suspicious, but it also offered an opportunity. If Patricia and Vanessa had some scheme in mind, this would be where they executed it. And I would be ready. I forwarded the email to Olivia with a brief message. "Going to get to the bottom of this. If you don't hear from me by Sunday night, call me." Then I texted Daniel. "I got Patricia's email. I'll be at Cedar Lake. We need to talk." His response was immediate. "Thank you, Rachel. I love you. We'll fix this, I promise." I put down my phone and looked up to find my mother watching me, worry creasing her brow. "You're not really going to that retreat, are you? It sounds like a trap." I nodded grimly. "It probably is, but it's also my chance to find out exactly what Vanessa and Patricia are planning, and to see where Daniel really stands." "Then I'm coming with you," Mom declared. "The invitation was for family only," I reminded her. "Well, I am your family," she shot back. "And if Patricia Wilson has a problem with that, she can take it up with me directly." I felt a surge of gratitude for my mother's unwavering support. Whatever happened at Cedar Lake, I wouldn't be facing it alone. That night, as I packed for the retreat, I found myself standing before the mirror, studying my reflection. The woman who stared back at me looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. But there was a determination there too. In just 24 hours, my life had been turned upside down. My marriage, my relationships with my in-laws, my sense of security, all of it had been shaken to the core. But as I zipped up my suitcase, I made a promise to myself. By the end of this weekend, I would have the truth, all of it. And whatever Patricia and Vanessa were planning, they were about to discover that I was not the pushover they thought I was. The Wilson family had no idea what was coming. The drive to Cedar Lake Resort was tense. Mom insisted on taking her car, following behind Daniel's SUV at a careful distance. I could see him glancing repeatedly in his rearview mirror. No doubt wondering about the conversation happening in the car behind him. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Keep me posted. I don't trust any of them." Neither did I, despite what I'd overheard between Daniel and Vanessa at the charity dinner. Cedar Lake Resort sprawled across 50 acres of pristine woodland. The North Lodge nestled against the shoreline with a stunning view of the mountains. Under different circumstances, I would have appreciated its beauty. Now it felt like entering enemy territory. Patricia and Robert stood on the wide porch, greeting everyone as they arrived. Patricia's smile faltered when she saw my mother emerging from her car. "Rachel, darling," she called out, her voice honey-sweet with an undercurrent of steel. "We weren't expecting Diane. This is a family retreat." "Mom is family," I replied firmly, watching Daniel's reaction from the corner of my eye. He seemed relieved to see me, taking a half step forward before stopping himself. "Of course she is," Robert interjected smoothly, always the peacemaker. "We have plenty of room. Welcome, Diane." Patricia's lips thinned, but she nodded stiffly. "Nathan will be joining us later tonight as well," she announced, referring to Vanessa's fiancé. I raised an eyebrow at that. If Nathan was coming, perhaps this wasn't a trap after all. Surely Vanessa wouldn't continue her inappropriate behavior. With Daniel if her own fiancé was present? As we entered the lodge, I noticed Vanessa hanging back, her expression unreadable. She wore an oversized sweater and leggings, looking almost demure compared to her usual provocative attire. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, feigning interest in the rustic decor. "We've prepared rooms for everyone," Patricia was saying, leading us down a hallway. "Rachel and Daniel, you'll be in the blue room. Vanessa, you and Nathan will have the pine suite when he arrives. Diane, I've put you in the small cabin by the lake. I hope that's suitable." My mother bristled at the obvious attempt to isolate her from the main house. "Actually, Patricia, I'd prefer to stay close to Rachel. Perhaps there's a room available in the lodge." Patricia's smile tightened further. "I'm afraid all the rooms in the main building are allocated. But don't worry. The cabin is quite comfortable. I'll stay in the cabin with Mom," I said quickly. "Daniel can have the blue room to himself." Daniel's face fell. "Rachel, I thought we were going to talk." "We will," I assured him. "But I think some space might be good for now." Patricia looked like she'd swallowed something sour, but she didn't argue. "As you wish. We'll be having dinner at 7 in the main dining room. I suggest everyone get settled and rest beforehand. It's been a stressful time for all of us." As we separated to our respective accommodations, Daniel caught my arm gently. "Can we talk now? Please?" I glanced at my mother, who nodded and continued toward the cabin with our bags. "I'll meet you there, Rachel." Once we were alone in the hallway, Daniel's composed facade crumbled. "Rachel, I'm so sorry about what happened. I should have pushed Vanessa away more firmly. I was caught off guard, and I didn't want to create a scene at our anniversary party. I saw her coming to our house the next morning," I interrupted, watching his reaction carefully. Daniel blinked, confusion crossing his features. "She showed up unannounced. I told her she needed to apologize to you and that her behavior was completely inappropriate." "And then you let her in?" "Only for a minute. I told her she needed to leave, that I was going to find you." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I knew well. "Rachel, I've known something was off with Vanessa since she moved back to Riverside, but I never thought she'd go this far. I've already spoken to my father about it." "What about your mother?" I asked, thinking of the Plan B conversation I'd overheard. Daniel hesitated. "Mom tends to make excuses for Vanessa. Always has. But Dad was furious when I told him what happened. I wanted to believe him, but caution held me back. I need time, Daniel. This weekend. Let's just see how it goes." He nodded, disappointment evident in his slumped shoulders. "I understand. But Rachel, I love you. Only you. I need you to know that." "I want to believe that," I said softly, before turning to follow my mother. The cabin was indeed charming, with large windows overlooking the lake and a small fireplace already stocked with wood. Mom was unpacking her suitcase, her face set in concentration. "What did Daniel have to say for himself?" she asked without looking up. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "He claims he rejected Vanessa, that he was trying to find me after she showed up at our house." "And you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted. "I overheard him arguing with Vanessa at the charity dinner, telling her to back off. But then there's this mysterious Plan B that Vanessa mentioned to Patricia." Mom zipped her empty suitcase and shoved it under the bed. "Well, we're here now. We'll keep our eyes open and figure out what they're up to. If anything," I added, "maybe I'm just being paranoid." Mom snorted. "After what you saw at your anniversary party? I don't think so, sweetheart." Dinner that evening was a masterclass in artificial civility. Patricia had prepared a feast, each dish more elaborate than the last. Robert poured expensive wine and made small talk about the fishing on the lake. Daniel kept trying to catch my eye across the table, while Vanessa remained unusually subdued. "Nathan just texted," Vanessa announced, checking her phone. "His flight was delayed. He won't make it until tomorrow afternoon." "How convenient," my mother murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. As we finished dessert, an overly sweet chocolate torte that Patricia pointedly mentioned was Daniel's favorite, Robert cleared his throat. "I think we should address the elephant in the room," he said, setting down his coffee cup. "There was an unfortunate incident at Daniel and Rachel's anniversary party that has caused some tension in our family." Patricia shot him a warning. "Look," but Robert continued. "Vanessa, I believe you owe Rachel and Daniel an apology." Vanessa looked down at her plate, her cheeks flushing slightly. "You're right, Dad." She raised her eyes to meet mine, her expression contrite. "Rachel, Daniel, I'm truly sorry for my behavior at the party. I had too much to drink, and I acted inappropriately. It won't happen again." The apology sounded rehearsed, empty. But before I could respond, Patricia jumped in. "We all make mistakes," she said soothingly. "The important thing is that we move forward as a family. In fact, that's why I suggested this retreat. I think we need to reconnect with each other. Remember what's truly important." "And what would that be, Patricia?" my mother asked, her tone deceptively light. "Family loyalty, of course," Patricia replied without missing a beat. "Supporting each other through difficult times." "Interesting," Mom said, swirling her wine. "I've always believed that loyalty should be earned through honesty and respect, not demanded regardless of behavior." The tension in the room thickened. Robert cleared his throat again. "Perhaps we should move to the living room for coffee. I've built a fire." As everyone shifted from the dining room, Daniel hung back to walk beside me. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "That apology was about as sincere as a politician's promise," I muttered. He sighed. "I know, but at least Dad is on our side. Is he? Or is he just trying to smooth things over for the sake of appearances?" Daniel looked hurt. "He's been texting me constantly since I told him what happened, offering support. Dad's always been straightforward." I wanted to believe that at least one member of the Wilson family was genuinely concerned about the damage Vanessa had caused, but skepticism had taken root deep within me. In the living room, Patricia announced her grand plan for the weekend. "Tomorrow morning, I've arranged for a family therapy session with Dr. Winters. He's agreed to come to the resort and help us work through our issues together." "A therapist?" I echoed, surprised. "You think one session is going to fix this?" "It's a start," Patricia insisted. "Dr. Winters is highly recommended. He specializes in family dynamics." Daniel looked as taken aback as I felt. "Mom, you've always said therapy was for people who couldn't solve their own problems." Patricia smiled tightly. "Well, clearly, we need some professional guidance at this point." I exchanged glances with my mother, who raised an eyebrow skeptically. Something didn't feel right about this sudden embrace of therapy from a woman who had previously mocked the very concept. After an uncomfortable hour of forced conversation around the fireplace, I excused myself, claiming fatigue. Mom followed shortly after, and we retreated to our cabin by the lake. "That therapy session tomorrow," Mom said as soon as we were alone. "That's their play." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. A therapist Patricia handpicked, probably primed with her version of events. It's a perfect opportunity to make you look unstable, overreacting to an innocent misunderstanding." The realization dawned on me. "You think this Dr. Winters is in on it?" Mom shrugged. "Maybe not deliberately, but Patricia has a way of manipulating situations to her advantage." I paced the small cabin, thoughts racing. "So what do we do? Refuse to participate?" "No," Mom said thoughtfully. "We play along, but carefully, and tonight we do some research on this Dr. Winters. A quick internet search revealed that Dr. Marcus Winters was indeed a licensed therapist specializing in family counseling. His website featured testimonials from satisfied clients and a list of impressive credentials. Nothing obviously suspicious. Doesn't mean he can't be manipulated, Mom pointed out. Patricia probably told him her version of events beforehand. I nodded, still scrolling through Dr. Winters' professional history. Wait a minute. I clicked on a link to a local newspaper article from 3 years ago. Look at this. The article featured a photo of Dr. Winters receiving a community service award, with Patricia standing beside him, presenting the plaque. The caption identified her as the chair of the charity that had sponsored the award. They know each other, I breathed. Patricia didn't mention that. Of course she didn't, Mom said grimly. Rachel, this whole weekend is a setup. I collapsed, onto the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. What am I going to do? Mom sat beside me, her expression resolute. We're going to beat them at their own game. If they want to play psychological warfare, they've picked the wrong opponents. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the lake a mirror of the cloudless sky. I'd barely slept, rehearsing what I would say in the therapy session, trying to anticipate Patricia and Vanessa's tactics. Daniel texted as we were preparing to head to the main lodge. I had no idea about Mom knowing Dr. Winters. Dad just told me, I'm sorry. At least Robert had some integrity, I thought, as we walked up the path to the main building. The therapy session was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the lodge's sunroom, a beautiful space with panoramic views of the lake and mountains. Dr. Winters was already there when we arrived, arranging chairs in a circle. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance. Ah, you must be Rachel, he said warmly, extending his hand. And this is your mother? I wasn't aware we would have extended family joining. Us? I hope that's not a problem, Mom replied with exaggerated sweetness. I'm here to support my daughter during this difficult time. Of course, Dr. Winters murmured, though his smile dimmed slightly. The more perspectives, the better. Patricia, Robert, Daniel, and Vanessa filed in, taking seats in the circle. I noticed that Patricia positioned herself directly across from me, with Vanessa to her right and Daniel between us, physically separated from me by the circle's arrangement. Now then, Dr. Winters began after introductions were complete. Patricia has briefed me on the situation. There was an incident at an anniversary celebration that has caused some tension in the family. I'd like to start by having each person share their perspective on what happened, beginning with Rachel. Being put on the spot immediately felt intentional, but I was prepared. I took a deep breath and recounted exactly what I had seen in the IC hallway at the terrace. Daniel pressed against the wall, Vanessa's hands on his chest, her lips near his ear. I described the aftermath, our fight, leaving the house, seeing Vanessa arrive at our home the next morning. And how did that make you feel? Dr. Winters asked, his tone professionally neutral. Betrayed, I said simply. Not just by what I saw, but by the fact that Vanessa was welcomed into our home the very next day. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, in his seat. Rachel, I told you. Dr. Winters held up a hand. We'll get to your perspective next, Daniel. Rachel, would you say you have a history of feeling betrayed easily? The leading question confirmed my suspicions about this session. No, I wouldn't say that. I think my reaction was proportional to seeing my sister-in-law attempting to seduce my husband at our anniversary party. Attempting to seduce, Vanessa exclaimed, her eyes wide with feigned shock. That's a serious accusation, Rachel. Vanessa, you'll have your turn, Dr. Winters admonished gently. Rachel, have you considered that you might have misinterpreted what you saw? Emotions were running high at the celebration. I understand alcohol was served. I wasn't drunk, if that's what you're implying, I said coldly. And there's not much room for interpretation when someone has their hands on my husband's chest and their lips at his ear. Dr. Winters made a note on his pad. Daniel, would you like to share your perspective? Daniel looked torn, his gaze moving between me and his family. Vanessa caught me alone in the hallway. She was overly affectionate, yes. She said some inappropriate things. I was trying to extract myself from the situation without causing a scene at our anniversary party when Rachel saw us. And what happened the next morning when Vanessa came to your house? I prompted, watching Patricia's face closely. She showed up unannounced, Daniel confirmed. I told her she needed to apologize to you and that her behavior was completely inappropriate. Then I asked her to leave. Is that true, Vanessa? Dr. Winters asked. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, a performance I'd seen before at family gatherings when she wanted attention. I went there to apologize. I felt terrible about what happened. I'd had too much to drink at the party, and I was emotional about seeing my brother so happy. I got carried away with a hug, that's all. And Rachel has blown it completely out of proportion. A hug, I repeated incredulously. You call pressing? My husband against a wall and whispering in his ear, a hug? Rachel, Dr. Winters interjected, it's important to let Vanessa finish her perspective without interruption. I bit back a retort, noting how quickly he had jumped to Vanessa's defense while allowing her to contradict my account. Continue, Vanessa, Dr. Winters encouraged. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue Patricia had conveniently ready. I've always been affectionate with Daniel. We're close. We always have been. Rachel knows that. But lately, she's been so distant, so wrapped up in her work, that I think she's looking for problems where they don't exist. That's not true, Daniel said, surprising everyone. Rachel has never complained about my relationship with Vanessa before, because before, there was nothing inappropriate about it. Patricia leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Daniel, dear, we all know how protective you are of Rachel. But you have to admit, she's been under a lot of stress lately with that big account at work. Her judgment might be affected. My mother, who had been observing silently, finally spoke up. I find it interesting, Patricia, that you're so quick to question Rachel's judgment, but not your daughter's behavior. Patricia's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Diane, I understand you want to defend your daughter, but we're trying to have a productive session here. As am I, Mom replied calmly, and I think it's relevant to note that Rachel has never had issues with the Wilson family dynamic until Vanessa physically crossed a line with Daniel. Dr. Winters cleared his throat. Let's try to focus on solutions rather than accusations. Robert, we haven't heard your perspective yet. Robert, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, straightened in his chair. I believe Rachel, he said simply. I love my daughter, but Vanessa has always pushed boundaries. And I don't appreciate the implication that Rachel is somehow emotionally unstable or overreacting. The stunned silence that followed was broken by Vanessa's indignant gasp. Dad, how can you say that? Because it's true, Robert continued, his voice steady. Patricia, you've been making excuses for Vanessa's behavior for years. It's time to acknowledge that what happened at that party was inappropriate, regardless of how much alcohol was involved. Patricia's face flushed with anger. Robert, we agreed. No, he cut her off. You agreed with whatever story Vanessa concocted. I agreed to this therapy session because I thought it might help heal the family, not further divide it with manipulation tactics. Dr. Winters looked distinctly uncomfortable now. Perhaps we should take a short break. I think that's an excellent idea, my mother said, standing. Rachel, let's get some fresh air. As we walked along the lakeshore, I tried to process what had just happened. I can't believe Robert stood up for me like that, I said, still somewhat in shock. Mom nodded approvingly. It took courage. He's probably been enabling Patricia and Vanessa for years by staying silent. Daniel defended me too, I added, but not as strongly as his father did. Daniel is caught in the middle, Mom observed. Between loyalty to you and fear of his mother and sister, Robert seems to have reached his breaking point. We sat on a bench overlooking the water, watching a pair of ducks glide across the surface. So what now? I asked. The therapy session obviously isn't going to resolve anything. No, but it revealed something important, Mom pointed out. Robert is an ally, and Patricia and Vanessa are not as united a front as they'd like to appear. There are cracks in their facade. When we returned to the sunroom, the atmosphere was markedly different. Patricia and Vanessa were huddled together in urgent conversation, while Robert and Daniel stood by the windows, talking quietly. Dr. Winters was reviewing his notes, looking distinctly uncomfortable. You're back, he said, attempting to regain control of the session. I think it might be beneficial to take a different approach. Rather than focusing on the specific incident, let's discuss how we can rebuild trust moving forward. Patricia immediately seized the opportunity. Yes, let's focus on healing. Rachel, what would help you feel more comfortable around Vanessa? The question was so disingenuous I almost laughed. For starters, an actual sincere apology, not the rehearsed performance from last night, and a genuine commitment to respecting boundaries. I apologized, Vanessa protested, both last night and at your house the next morning. No, you made excuses, I corrected her. You blamed alcohol. You minimized what happened. That's not an apology. Dr. Winters intervened. Vanessa, would you be willing to offer Rachel a more direct apology now? Vanessa looked cornered, glancing at her mother for support. Patricia gave a slight nod, and Vanessa turned to me with a carefully composed expression. Rachel, I'm sorry for making you uncomfortable at your anniversary party. It won't happen again. It was still vague, still avoiding responsibility, but I nodded curtly. Thank you. Now, Rachel, Dr. Winters continued, would you be willing to forgive Vanessa and move forward? Forgiveness takes time, I said carefully, and it requires trust. Right now, I don't trust Vanessa's intentions. That seems rather harsh, Patricia interjected. If you're going to hold on to this grudge, it's not a grudge, Patricia, my mother cut in. It's a reasonable response to a violation of trust. Dr. Winters looked increasingly flustered as he lost control of the session. Perhaps we should establish some concrete boundaries that everyone can agree to. I think that's an excellent idea, Robert said firmly. For instance, Vanessa should respect Rachel and Daniel's personal space and privacy. No more unannounced visits to their home. Vanessa rolled her eyes but didn't object. And Patricia, Robert continued, surprising everyone again, should stop interfering in Daniel and Rachel's marriage. No more commentary on Rachel's work schedule or subtle criticisms disguised as concern. Patricia gasped. Robert, I have never... You have, Mom, Daniel said quietly. Dad's right. You've been undermining Rachel since we got engaged. The therapy session continued to unravel as years of unspoken tensions rose to the surface. Dr. Winters made increasingly desperate attempts to steer the conversation back to productive dialogue, but it was clear that the carefully orchestrated intervention had backfired spectacularly. By the time we broke for lunch, alliances had shifted dramatically. Robert and Daniel stood firmly together, with my mother and me forming a united front across from Patricia and Vanessa. Dr. Winters looked relieved to excuse himself, claiming he needed to make some phone calls. As we moved to the dining room, where Patricia had arranged for a catered lunch, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Olivia. Nathan called the office looking for Vanessa, said he's been trying to reach her but her phone is going straight to voicemail. He seems worried. Thought you should know. I frowned, showing the message to my mother. That's odd. Vanessa said his flight was delayed until this afternoon. Mom raised an eyebrow. Another lie? I'm shocked. Just then, Vanessa's phone rang, and she quickly silenced it, glancing nervously at Patricia. "Aren't you going to answer that?" I asked innocently. "It might be Nathan." Vanessa forced a smile. "It's just a work call. I'll return it later." I decided to press further. "Actually, Olivia just texted me. Nathan called our office looking for you. He said he's been trying to reach you." The color drained from Vanessa's. "Oh, why would Nathan call your office?" "Good question," I replied, watching her squirm. "He seems worried about you, almost as if he doesn't know where you are." Patricia stepped in smoothly. "Vanessa, dear, perhaps you should call Nathan back. Clear up any confusion." The tension in the room was palpable as Vanessa excused herself, phone clutched tightly in her hand. Daniel was looking between me and Patricia, confusion evident in his expression. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. "Is Nathan actually coming today?" Patricia busied herself arranging place settings that were already perfectly aligned. "Of course he is. There's just been a miscommunication, that's all." Robert moved to stand beside Daniel. "Patricia, enough with the games. What are you and Vanessa up to?" Patricia's facade cracked slightly, her eyes flashing with anger. "I don't know what you're talking about, Robert. I'm trying to help our family heal." "By orchestrating this entire weekend?" I challenged. "By bringing in a therapist who knows you personally but conveniently failed to disclose that fact?" "Dr. Winters is a highly respected professional," Patricia insisted. "But—" her voice lacked conviction. "Who happened to receive an award from your charity?" my mother added. "Quite the coincidence." Daniel looked stunned. "Mom, is that true? Did you deliberately choose Dr. Winters because you knew him?" Before Patricia could respond, Vanessa returned, her expression tight with anger. "Nathan is on his way here," she announced. "He's been looking for me since yesterday. Apparently, someone told him I was at Cedar Lake with a surprise guest." All eyes turned to me, and I raised my hands in innocent denial. "Don't look at me. I had no idea Nathan was even trying to find you." Robert stepped forward, his usually jovial face stern. "I called him," he admitted. "Last night, after dinner. I thought he should be here if we're really trying to resolve family issues." Patricia looked at her husband in disbelief. "Robert, how could you?" "Easily," he replied, his voice level. "I'm tired of the scheming, Patricia. Tired of watching you and Vanessa manipulate situations to suit yourselves, regardless of who gets hurt." The room fell silent as decades of marital tension crystallized into this single moment of confrontation. Daniel moved to stand beside his father, a symbolic gesture that spoke volumes. "I think," my mother said quietly, "that we should all take some time to cool off before Nathan arrives. Rachel, why don't we go for a walk?" I nodded, grateful for the suggestion. As we headed for the door, Daniel caught up with us. "Can I join you?" he asked hesitantly. "I think we need to talk." With a glance at my mother, who nodded encouragingly, I agreed. "Yes, I think we do." As we stepped outside into the crisp mountain air, leaving behind the suffocating atmosphere of the lodge, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Whatever Patricia and Vanessa had planned for this weekend, their scheme was unraveling rapidly. And for the first time since that devastating moment at our anniversary party, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps my marriage wasn't beyond saving after all. Daniel reached for my hand as we walked toward the lake, and after a moment's hesitation, I let him take it. We had a long way to go to rebuild what had been broken, but it was a start. The path around Cedar Lake was peaceful, the only sounds coming from birds calling to each other and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. My mother had tactfully fallen behind, giving Daniel and me some space to talk. The silence between us felt heavy with unspoken words. "I had no idea about my mother and Dr. Winters," Daniel finally said, his voice low. "Or about Nathan, not actually. Being delayed." "I swear, Rachel." "I believe you," I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Your father's intervention changed everything. Daniel squeezed my hand gently. Dad's always seen through Mom's manipulations, but he usually keeps the peace. I've never seen him stand up to her like that before. Why now? I wondered aloud. Because this time it went too far, Daniel said simply. Vanessa crossing that line with me, Mom enabling her behavior. It threatened something Dad values, our marriage. We walked in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us. I'm sorry I didn't push Vanessa away more forcefully at the party, Daniel continued. I was shocked, and I didn't want to create a scene, but I should have been clearer with her. And when she came to the house? Daniel sighed heavily. I told her she needed to apologize to you, a real apology, not excuses. She got defensive, claimed you were overreacting. That's when I told her to leave and that we needed distance from each other for a while. I nodded, processing his words. They aligned with what I'd overheard at the charity dinner, but doubt still lingered. Have Vanessa and your mother always been this way? Daniel frowned, considering the question. Mom has always favored Vanessa, made excuses for her behavior. And Vanessa has always been possessive of me, especially when it comes to my relationships. But it's gotten worse since we got married. Because I took her place as the most important woman in your life, I murmured, the realization dawning. Exactly. And it's only escalated since Vanessa moved back to Riverside after her divorce. I stopped walking, turning to face him. Her divorce? Vanessa was married before Nathan? Daniel looked surprised. You didn't know? It was about 3 years ago. She never talks about it. Apparently, he left her for another woman, his assistant. Something clicked into place in my mind. So when she saw you happy with me at our anniversary party, it might have triggered something, Daniel admitted. Not that it excuses her behavior. Nothing does. We resumed walking, and I found myself reevaluating Vanessa's actions. Not excusing them, but understanding them in a new light. Her inappropriate behavior with Daniel wasn't just about possessiveness. It was a twisted attempt to rewrite her own painful history, to prove she could be the other woman rather than the one left behind. My mother caught up with us as we rounded a bend in the path. Nathan's car just pulled into the resort, she announced. Thought you might want to know. Daniel and I exchanged glances. We should head back, he said. This could get messy. When we arrived at the lodge, we found Nathan in the living room, his expression thunderous. He was tall and athletically built, with dark hair and the confident bearing of someone used to being in control. Vanessa stood nearby, her arms crossed defensively, while Patricia hovered anxiously between them. Robert sat in an armchair, observing the scene with a mixture of resignation and satisfaction. There you are, Nathan said when he spotted us. You must be Rachel and Daniel. I've heard so much about you. His tone was cordial, but there was an edge to it. Nice to finally meet you, I replied, extending my hand. Though I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Nathan shook my hand, firmly. So am I. Apparently, I wasn't supposed to know about this family retreat until Vanessa deemed it appropriate to tell me. Vanessa made a sound of exasperation. It's not like that, Nathan. I was going to call you after the therapy session. The therapy session that Rachel's mother-in-law arranged with a therapist she personally knows? Nathan raised an eyebrow. Yes, Robert filled me in on the drive from the airport. Quite the elaborate setup. Patricia stepped forward, her social hostess smile firmly in place despite the tension. Nathan, dear, there seems to be a misunderstanding. I arranged this weekend as a way for our family to heal after an unfortunate incident, involving Vanessa making inappropriate advances toward her brother at his anniversary party. Nathan finished bluntly. Yes, I got that part too. The room fell silent. Vanessa's face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. It wasn't like that, she insisted weakly. Then what was it like? Nathan challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Patricia orchestrated this entire weekend to gaslight Rachel and manipulate Daniel, while deliberately keeping me in the dark. Patricia's composure cracked slightly. That is absurd. I was simply trying to help my family through a difficult time. By bringing in a therapist you have a personal connection with, I pointed out. By isolating my mother in a separate cabin? By trying to make me question my own perceptions? And by lying to me about a delayed flight, Nathan added, his gaze fixed on Vanessa. I was never booked on a flight. I was in town the whole time, wondering why you weren't answering my calls. Vanessa's defensive posture crumbled slightly. I needed space to handle this family situation. I knew you wouldn't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Nathan retorted. What I don't understand is why you thought I would be okay with any of this. Robert stood up, seemingly deciding it was time to step in. Perhaps we should all take some time to calm down. Nathan, we've prepared the Pine Suite for you, as Vanessa mentioned you'd be joining us. Actually, Nathan said firmly, I'm not staying. I came to understand exactly what was happening here, and now I have my answer. He turned to Vanessa. We need to talk, privately. As Vanessa reluctantly followed Nathan out to the porch, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Patricia looked unusually flustered, her careful plans clearly unraveling before her eyes. I think I'll check on lunch, she announced, retreating to the kitchen with as much dignity as she could muster. Robert exchanged glances with Daniel. Well, that went about as well as could be expected. Did you tell Nathan everything? Daniel asked his father. Robert nodded. I called him last night after I overheard your mother and Vanessa talking. They didn't know I was in the study. Patricia was coaching Vanessa on what to say during the therapy session. How to make Rachel seem emotionally unstable and you codependent. I felt a chill run through me despite the warmth of the room. So this whole weekend really was an elaborate trap. For both of you, Robert confirmed grimly. Patricia was convinced that if she could get you to appear unreasonable, Daniel would see sense and rethink your marriage. Daniel looked stunned. Why would Mom do that? She's always said she liked Rachel. Robert sighed, the weight of decades of marriage to Patricia evident in his expression. Your mother has never thought any woman was good enough for you, Daniel. But Rachel is independent, successful, and doesn't defer to Patricia's judgment. All unforgivable sins in your mother's book. And Vanessa? I prompted. What's her role in all this? Vanessa has always wanted what she can't have, Robert said bluntly. She's been jealous of your relationship with Daniel from the beginning. Patricia encouraged it, believing that somehow Vanessa deserved Daniel's attention more than you did. The casual cruelty of it all took my breath away. I had known there were tensions with my in-laws, but I had never imagined this level of deliberate manipulation. My mother, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Robert, I appreciate your honesty. But why now? Why are you telling us? All this after years of silence? Robert looked at her thoughtfully. Because I'm tired, Diane. Tired of watching my wife and daughter hurt people I care about. Tired of pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. He turned to Daniel and me. I should have stepped in sooner. I'm sorry. Through the window, we could see Nathan and Vanessa in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Vanessa was gesturing emphatically, tears streaming down her face, while Nathan stood with his arms crossed, his expression hardening with each passing moment. That doesn't look good, Mom observed. Daniel nodded grimly. Nathan's a good guy. Successful, honest, straightforward. Everything Vanessa usually gets bored with within months. I was surprised when the engagement lasted. As we watched, Nathan shook his head decisively, turned away from Vanessa, and strode toward his car. Vanessa followed, grabbing his arm, but he gently removed her hand and continued walking. A minute later, His car was disappearing down the resort's driveway. Vanessa stood motionless on the path, staring after the car until it was out of sight. Then she turned toward the lodge, her face a mask of fury as she spotted us watching from the window. "Perfect," Daniel muttered. "Now she's going to blame us for this too." Sure enough, Vanessa burst through the front door moments later, her eyes red but blazing with anger. "Are you happy now?" she demanded, looking directly at me. "Nathan just broke off our engagement. I hope you're satisfied." Before I could respond, Robert stepped forward. "That's enough, Vanessa. You have no one to blame but yourself." "Oh, shut up, Dad," Vanessa snapped. "You've never been on my side, always defending precious Daniel and his perfect life." "This isn't about taking sides," Robert said firmly. "This is about acknowledging inappropriate behavior and its consequences." Vanessa let out a bitter laugh. "Consequences? What about her?" She pointed at me accusingly. "She comes into our family, takes Daniel away, makes Mom miserable, and everyone acts like she's some kind of saint." "Takes Daniel away?" I repeated incredulously. "He's my husband, Vanessa. We built a life together. That doesn't mean he stopped being your brother or Patricia's son." "It's not the same, and you know it," Vanessa retorted. "Ever since you got married, everything has been about Rachel. Rachel's job, Rachel's schedule, Rachel's preferences. That's how marriage works," my mother interjected dryly. "The spouse generally becomes the priority." Vanessa rounded on her. "No one asked you. You're not even supposed to be here." "That's enough," Daniel said, his voice quiet but firm. "Vanessa, I love you. You're my sister. But what you did at our anniversary party crossed a line, and your behavior since then has only made things worse. You need to take responsibility for your actions instead of blaming Rachel for their consequences." Vanessa's expression crumpled momentarily before hardening again. "You've always taken her side." "Because she's my wife," Daniel replied simply. "Just like Nathan was going to be your husband, and you should have prioritized him." The mention of Nathan seemed to drain the fight from Vanessa. She sank onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "He said he can't trust me anymore. That if I could lie about this and participate in such a scheme, he doesn't know who I really am." Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. Vanessa had orchestrated her own downfall, but the pain in her voice was real. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, her composure at least partially restored. "What's all this shouting about? Where's Nathan?" "Gone," Vanessa said flatly. "He broke off the engagement." Patricia's eyes widened in genuine shock. "What? Why would he do that?" "Because," Robert interjected before Vanessa could respond, "he discovered that his fiancée was involved in a plot to break up her brother's marriage and lied to him about this entire weekend. Surprisingly, he took issue with that." Patricia's face flushed with anger. "This is your doing, Robert. You had no right to interfere." "I had every right," Robert countered. "This has gone far enough, Patricia. The manipulations, the lies, the constant undermining of Daniel and Rachel's relationship. It stops now." Patricia drew herself up to her full height, her voice icily controlled. "I have only ever wanted what's best for my children." "No," Robert said sadly. "You've only ever wanted what you decided was best for them, regardless of what they actually needed or wanted." The tension in the room was suffocating. I glanced at Daniel, who looked torn between decades of conditioning to keep the peace and the newfound resolve to stand his ground. "I think," my mother said carefully, "that perhaps Rachel and I should give the Wilson family some privacy to discuss these matters." I nodded, grateful for the suggestion. "We'll take a walk," I agreed, moving toward the door. "Daniel, we'll be back in a while." Daniel hesitated, clearly reluctant to be left alone with his family in this volatile state. "I'll come with you." "No," I said gently. You need to be part of this conversation. It's been a long time coming. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Okay, but be careful. The trails can get confusing if you go too far. As Mom and I headed outside, Vanessa's bitter voice floated after us. Of course, run away. That's what Rachel does when things get tough. I paused in the doorway, turning back to face her. Actually, Vanessa, I'm giving your family space to address issues that have clearly been festering for years. But make no mistake, I'm not running away. I'll be back, and when I am, we'll need to have our own conversation. The surprised respect in Robert's eyes and the subtle nod of approval from Daniel gave me confidence as I closed the door behind us. Mom and I walked in silence for a few minutes, following a different path than the one Daniel and I had taken earlier. This one led uphill, through a stand of pine trees that offered glimpses of the lake through their branches. Well, Mom said finally, that was quite the morning. I laughed despite the heaviness in my chest. That's one way to put it. How are you feeling about everything? She asked, studying my face carefully. I considered the question, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions. Validated in a way. Robert confirming that Patricia and Vanessa were deliberately trying to manipulate me and Daniel. It's awful, but at least I know I wasn't imagining things. Mom nodded thoughtfully. And Daniel? Where does this leave the two of you? I don't know yet, I admitted. I believe him when he says he rejected Vanessa's advances. And seeing him stand up to his family today, that means something. But there's still so much damage to repair. Trust takes time to rebuild, Mom agreed. But at least now you're both operating from a place of truth, not manipulation. We reached a clearing that offered a panoramic view of the lake and the mountains beyond. I sat on a fallen log, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the past few days. Do you think they can change? I asked. Patricia and Vanessa? Mom sat beside me, her expression thoughtful. People can change if they want to, if they recognize the harm they've caused and genuinely desire to be better, but they have to want it for themselves, not because they're forced into it. And if they don't change? Then you and Daniel set boundaries, clear, firm boundaries about what behavior is acceptable and what isn't, and you enforce them consistently. The wisdom in her words resonated, but implementing such boundaries would be challenging. Patricia had spent decades as the unchallenged matriarch of the Wilson family, and Vanessa had always gotten her way through tantrums and manipulation. It won't be easy, I said aloud. Mom squeezed my hand. Few things worth doing are, but you're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Rachel. And from what I saw today, Daniel might be finding his strength too. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunlight dance on the lake's surface. After everything that had happened, this moment of peace felt precious. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the tranquility. I turned to see Grace Chen climbing up the path toward us, her expression concerned. Grace? What are you doing here? I asked, surprised. Robert called me, she explained, slightly out of breath from the climb. He thought you might need a friendly face after everything that's happened. He filled me in on the basics. I made space for her on the log. It's been quite a morning. Grace sat down studying my face. So, I gather. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I admitted. It helps to have confirmation that I wasn't imagining things or overreacting. Grace nodded sympathetically. Robert said Patricia and Vanessa were trying to make you look unstable. That's gaslighting, plain and simple. The question is, what happens now? Mom interjected. Nathan's gone. The therapy session was a disaster, and the family secrets are out in the open. Grace looked out over the lake thoughtfully. In my experience, when manipulative people are exposed, they either double down or retreat to regroup. Either way, they rarely surrender without a fight. Great, I muttered. So this is just the beginning. Not necessarily, Grace countered. Robert standing up to Patricia was significant. He's enabled her behavior for years by staying silent. Now that he's speaking out, the power dynamic has shifted. I considered this perspective. Daniel seemed stronger today, too, less caught in the middle. That's a good sign, Grace agreed. But be prepared for Patricia to use every emotional manipulation in her arsenal to regain control. She's not going to give up her influence easily. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Need you to come back. Mom is threatening to leave unless you apologize for dividing the family. Dad and I are standing firm, but it's getting ugly. I showed the message to Mom and Grace, who exchanged knowing glances. Right on schedule, Grace said dryly. The victim card. Should I go back? I asked, suddenly uncertain. I don't want to make things worse. Mom's expression was resolute. I think we should all go back. Present a united front, but you don't. Owe Patricia an apology, and you shouldn't offer one just to keep the peace. Grace nodded in agreement. Giving in now would only reinforce that her manipulation tactics work. We made our way back down the path toward the lodge, a sense of foreboding building with each step. I had faced challenges in my professional life, difficult clients, and high-pressure situations, but nothing had prepared me for the emotional warfare of the Wilson family dynamics. As we approached the lodge, we could hear raised voices from inside. Patricia's distinctive tone carried through the open windows, high and indignant. After everything I've done for this family, this is how you repay me? Taking her side over your own mother and sister? We paused on the porch, reluctant to interrupt the confrontation but knowing it needed to end. Mom squeezed my hand reassuringly, and Grace gave an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The scene inside was chaotic. Patricia stood in the center of the room, a suitcase at her feet, while Robert and Daniel faced her with identical expressions of exasperation. Vanessa sat on the couch, her face tear-streaked, but her eyes calculating as she watched the drama unfold. All eyes turned to us as we entered. Well, Patricia said coldly, the prodigal daughter-in-law returns, with reinforcements no less. I got Daniel's text, I said calmly. What's happening? Mom is threatening to leave, Daniel explained, the weariness evident in his voice. She wants you to apologize for turning the family against each other. I looked at Patricia, taking in her rigid posture and the defensive anger in her eyes. In that moment, I saw beyond the manipulative matriarch to the insecure woman beneath. Someone so afraid of losing control, of losing her place in her son's life, that she would resort to elaborate schemes and emotional blackmail. I'm not going to apologize for something I didn't do, I said quietly. But I am sorry that things have reached this point. This isn't what any of us wanted for our family. Patricia's expression faltered slightly at my measured tone. She had clearly expected either defensive anger or desperate placation. If you truly cared about this family, she began, but Robert cut her off. Patricia, enough. Rachel isn't the one who tried to seduce her brother-in-law or orchestrated a fake therapy intervention. If anyone should be apologizing, it's you and Vanessa. Vanessa stood up, her voice trembling with a mixture of genuine emotion and practiced victim rhetoric. Of course it's all my fault. It always is. No one ever considers that maybe I'm hurting too. I just lost my fiancé, but all anyone cares about is precious Rachel's feelings. You lost your fiancé because of your own actions. Grace pointed out gently but firmly. Actions have consequences, Vanessa. Who asked you? Vanessa snapped. This is a family matter. Which is exactly why I called Grace, Robert interjected. We clearly need an objective perspective, someone who isn't enmeshed in these dysfunctional patterns. Patricia's eyes narrowed. So you've been planning this intervention behind my back? Recruiting allies? No, Mom, Daniel said firmly. Dad called Grace because he was concerned about how this weekend was unfolding. Because he recognized that your agenda wasn't actually about healing the family, but about controlling it. Patricia's composure finally cracked. How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I've sacrificed for you. What exactly have you sacrificed, Patricia? My mother asked, her tone genuinely curious rather than confrontational. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've prioritized your own desires and control over your son's happiness. For perhaps the first time in her life, Patricia Wilson found herself without a ready response. She looked around the room, at her husband and son standing united against her manipulations, at her daughter, whose schemes had backfired spectacularly, at the three women who had seen through her carefully constructed facade. I won't be spoken to like this, she finally said, her voice brittle. Vanessa, we're leaving. Vanessa hesitated, glancing between her mother and the rest of us. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of resistance in her eyes, a hint that perhaps she recognized her mother's toxic influence. But years of conditioning won out, and she rose to stand beside Patricia. Fine, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. There's nothing for me here anyway. Robert stepped forward, his expression sad but resolute. If you leave now, Patricia, you're making a choice that might be difficult to come back from. Patricia lifted her chin defiantly. Are you threatening me, Robert? No, he said quietly. I'm telling you that running away rather than facing the truth and taking responsibility will damage your relationship with Daniel, perhaps irreparably. Is that really what you want? Uncertainty flickered across Patricia's face, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her all weekend. She looked at Daniel, perhaps expecting him to cave as he had so many times before, to beg her to stay. But Daniel stood his ground, his expression sad but determined. Mom, we need to address these issues, not run from them. Please stay. Let's work through this together. The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach Patricia in a way that confrontation hadn't. Her rigid posture softened slightly, and she glanced at Vanessa, who looked suddenly uncertain. Patricia hesitated, clearly torn between her pride and the genuine connection with her son. I need some time to think. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a step back from the brink. Robert nodded, relief evident in his expression. Take all the time you need. The Pine Suite is available now that Nathan's gone. The reference to Nathan caused Vanessa to flinch visibly. I'll help you with your bag, Mom, she said quickly, clearly eager to escape the tension in the room. As they retreated down the hallway, an exhausted silence fell over the living room. Daniel sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. Well, he said with a hollow laugh, this is certainly not how I expected this weekend to go. Grace moved to sit beside him, her expression gentle. Family confrontations are never easy, but sometimes they're necessary. Robert looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. Thank you, Rachel, for not backing down. Patricia has gotten her way for so long that she doesn't know how to respond when someone stands firm. I nodded, understanding the complex mix of emotions he must be feeling. Love for his wife combined with the painful recognition of her manipulative behavior. What happens now? I asked, looking around at our unlikely alliance. Mom settled into an armchair, her practical nature asserting itself. Now we figure out a path forward, one with clear boundaries and expectations. Daniel looked up at me, hope and uncertainty mingling in his eyes. Together? It was a simple question, but weighted with meaning. Was I willing to work through this mess with him? To face the challenges of redefining our relationship with his family? To give our marriage another chance after the pain of betrayal, even if that betrayal wasn't what I'd initially feared? I moved to sit beside him on the couch, taking his hand in mine. Together, I confirmed softly. But it won't be easy. He squeezed my hand, understanding in his eyes. Nothing worthwhile ever is. As the afternoon light streamed through the windows of Cedar Lake Lodge, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, I felt a tentative sense of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential conflicts and difficult conversations. Patricia and Vanessa might retreat temporarily, but they wouldn't surrender their influence without a fight. Yet, looking around at the people gathered in that room, Daniel finding his voice, Robert breaking decades of silence, my mother providing unwavering support, Grace offering her objective wisdom, I knew we weren't facing these challenges alone. The family was divided, yes. But perhaps that division was necessary for something healthier to emerge from the wreckage of manipulative patterns and unhealthy attachments. Only time would tell if Patricia and Vanessa could acknowledge their behavior and commit to change. But regardless of their choices, Daniel and I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming our marriage on our own terms. As the afternoon wore on and plans were made for dinner, I found myself thinking about the moment at our anniversary party that had started this cascade of revelations. Had Vanessa known her actions would lead to this reckoning? Had she intended to destroy our marriage, only to find her own relationship as collateral damage? Somehow I doubted it. Like most manipulators, Vanessa had likely believed she could control the outcome, shape the narrative to her advantage. Instead, she had inadvertently triggered a long-overdue confrontation that threatened the very foundation of the Wilson family, dynamics. There was a certain poetic justice in that, I thought, watching as Robert and Daniel moved to the kitchen to prepare dinner, their voices low but companionable. From crisis comes opportunity. The opportunity to rebuild something stronger, more authentic, more resilient than what had come before. And as Grace and my mother engaged in conversation about the boundaries we would need to establish moving forward, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the painful events of the past few days might ultimately lead to healing, rather than permanent division. The scent of Robert's homemade pasta sauce filled the lodge's kitchen, rich with garlic and herbs. After everything that had happened, the simple act of preparing dinner together felt unexpectedly healing. Daniel chopped vegetables while Robert stirred the sauce, their movements in sync despite the lingering tension from earlier confrontations. In the living room, Mom, Grace, and I were setting the table, the mundane task grounding us in normalcy after hours of emotional turmoil. "Should we set places for Patricia and Vanessa?" I asked, hesitating with plates in hand. Grace glanced toward the hallway leading to the Pine Suite, where mother and daughter had retreated. "Yes, give them the opportunity to join, even if they choose not to." As if summoned by our conversation, Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her eyes puffy, but her demeanor composed. She had changed into a simple sweater and jeans, her usual dramatic styling notably absent. "Something smells good," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Dad's making his famous pasta," Daniel replied from the kitchen. "There's plenty if you and Mom want to join us." Vanessa seemed to weigh her options, pride battling with hunger, and perhaps a desire for connection. "I'll ask her," she said finally, disappearing back down the hallway. Grace caught my eye, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I shrugged, uncertain what to make of this apparent olive branch. A few minutes later, to everyone's surprise, both Vanessa and Patricia emerged. Patricia had visibly pulled herself together, her hair freshly styled and her makeup impeccable, as if preparing for battle. But her expression was subdued, lacking its usual imperious confidence. "Robert's pasta was always impossible to resist," she said by way of explanation, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Dinner commenced in awkward silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware against plates and occasional murmurs of appreciation for the food. Robert had outdone himself, the pasta perfectly al dente and the sauce complex with layers of flavor. It was Grace who finally broke the stalemate. "I think we've all had enough confrontation for one day," she said. gently. Perhaps we could use this meal as a moment of respite before addressing the issues that brought us here. Patricia dabbed at her lips with a napkin. And what issues would those be, exactly? The question could have been confrontational, but her tone was genuinely curious, almost vulnerable. Grace met her gaze steadily. The patterns of manipulation and control that have damaged your relationships with Daniel and Rachel, the unhealthy attachment Vanessa has to her brother, the way Robert has enabled these dynamics by remaining silent for so long. Patricia flinched slightly at the direct assessment, but didn't immediately reject it. Progress, however small. "I've always wanted what's best for my children," she said after a moment. "I believe that," Grace replied. "But there's a difference between wanting what's best for someone and believing you know better than they do what that entails." The observation hung in the air, penetrating the carefully constructed justifications Patricia had built around her behavior. "When Daniel first brought Rachel home," Patricia said suddenly, "I saw how he looked at her, like she was the answer to a question he hadn't even known to ask." She looked down at her plate, rearranging pasta with her fork. "I was afraid." Daniel's head snapped up, surprise evident on his face. "Afraid? Of what?" "Of losing you," Patricia admitted, the words seeming to cost her. "You've always been so loyal, so eager to please. Then suddenly there was this woman who clearly came first in your heart, who didn't defer to me or seek my approval." I stared at Patricia, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time, not as the manipulative matriarch, but as a mother terrified of becoming irrelevant in her son's life. "That's what mothers are supposed to want," Robert said gently. "For their children to find partners who become their priority." Patricia shook her head slightly. "In theory, yes, but the reality was harder than I expected." "So you tried to undermine their relationship," Grace observed, her tone remaining neutral despite the damning assessment. "I wouldn't put it that way," Patricia protested, but the objection lacked conviction. Vanessa, who had been pushing food around her plate without eating, finally looked up. "I just wanted things to go back to how they were before," she said quietly. "When it was the four of us, before Rachel came along." "But things can never go back," Daniel pointed out. "That's not how life works. We grow, we change, we form new relationships." "Easy for you to say," Vanessa retorted, a flash of her earlier bitterness returning. "You got everything you wanted. Career success, a beautiful wife, mom and dad's approval. What did I get? A failed marriage, a broken engagement, and a reputation as the family screw-up." The raw honesty of her words silenced the table. For all her manipulation and inappropriate behavior, Vanessa's pain was real, and perhaps at the root of her actions. "I never saw you as a screw-up," Daniel said after a moment. "I've always admired your passion, your fearlessness." Vanessa let out a hollow laugh. "Right. That's why you're always fixing my messes, right? Because you admire me so much." "I help because I love you," Daniel replied simply. "But maybe I've been enabling your behavior rather than truly helping you grow." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "We've all been guilty of that, of settling into comfortable patterns rather than challenging each other to be better." Patricia seemed to be processing everything she was hearing, her typical defensiveness notably absent. Finally, she turned to me. "Rachel, I owe you an apology. My behavior toward you has been unfair." The admission was unexpected and clearly difficult for her. I accepted it with a nod, not quite ready to verbalize forgiveness, but acknowledging the effort it had taken. "And the incident at the anniversary party?" Grace prompted, looking at Vanessa. Vanessa squirmed uncomfortably. "I had too much to drink," she began, falling back on her earlier excuse. "Vanessa," Robert's voice was gentle but firm. "The truth, please. She sighed, slumping slightly in her chair. Fine. I was jealous, okay? Watching them celebrate 5 perfect years while my own engagement was falling apart. What? Daniel interrupted, surprised. You and Nathan were having problems? You never said anything. Because it was embarrassing, Vanessa admitted. He was pulling away, working late, canceling plans. I suspected he was having second thoughts. And then I had to attend your anniversary celebration, pretend everything was fine while you two were so disgustingly happy. So, you tried to seduce your brother? My mother's blunt question cut through Vanessa's self-pitying narrative. Vanessa's face flushed. I wasn't thinking clearly, I just wanted, I don't know, to prove I could still be desirable, that I had power. It was stupid and wrong. I know that. The honest admission hung in the air, its impact magnified by the earlier denials and excuses. Daniel reached across the table, placing his hand over his sister's. I'm sorry about your relationship with Nathan, but what you did, it can't happen again, Vanessa. Ever. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know. And now I've lost Nathan for good anyway. Actions have consequences, Grace said, not unkindly. The question is, what are you going to learn from this? The conversation continued as dinner wound down, veering between painful honesty and tentative steps toward reconciliation. No. Magic solutions emerged, no dramatic transformations occurred, but there was a sense of something shifting, walls beginning to crack, if not yet fall. As we cleared the dishes, Daniel pulled me aside. Are you okay? He asked quietly. This has been a lot to process. I nodded, surprised to find it was true. I think so. Hearing Patricia and Vanessa actually acknowledge their behavior. It helps. But it doesn't erase what happened, he said, understanding in his eyes. No, I agreed. We still have a long way to go. But at least now we're dealing with the truth, not with gaslighting and manipulation. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been hovering between us since the moment I saw him with Vanessa at our anniversary party. Can we fix this, Rachel? Can we find our way back to what we had? I considered my answer carefully. I don't think we can go back to exactly what we had. Too much has happened. But maybe we can build something new, something stronger, with clearer boundaries and a better understanding of the challenges we're facing. Daniel nodded, relief evident in his expression. That's all I ask. A chance to rebuild. As the, evening progressed, Patricia announced she was retiring for the night, the emotional toll of the day evident in the droop of her shoulders and the lines around her eyes. Vanessa followed shortly after, pausing at the doorway. For what it's worth, she said, looking directly at me. I am sorry, Rachel. Not just for what happened at the party, but for everything since. I've been awful to you for reasons that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own issues. The apology sounded genuine, a far cry from her rehearsed performance at dinner the previous night. Thank you, I said simply. That means something. After Vanessa left, Robert sighed heavily, slumping into an armchair. Well, that was unexpected. Patricia actually admitting she was wrong? I can count on one hand the number of times that's happened in our marriage. Do you think it will last? Daniel asked. This moment of clarity? Robert shrugged. Hard to say. Old habits die hard. But at least the issues are out in the open now. That's a start. Grace checked her watch. I should head back to town. My husband will be wondering where I've disappeared to. She stood, gathering her purse. Rachel, Daniel, remember what we discussed. Clear boundaries, consistently enforced. Don't let yourselves be pulled back into old patterns out of guilt or obligation. After Grace left, Mom excused herself as well, heading to the cabin with a pointed look that told me she was giving Daniel and me space to talk. Robert took the Hinton retreated to his room, leaving us alone in the living room. The fire had died down to embers, casting a warm glow across the rustic space. Outside, night had fallen completely, the darkness beyond the windows broken only by the occasional gleam of moonlight on the lake. Daniel added another log to the fire, the flames flaring briefly before settling into a steady burn. He sat beside me on the couch, close but not touching, respecting the emotional distance between us despite the physical proximity. "When I saw Vanessa with you that night," I said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence, my whole world tilted on its axis. Everything I thought I knew about us, about your family, it all came into question. Daniel nodded, pain evident in his expression. "I can only imagine. And then for Mom and Vanessa to try to make you doubt your own perceptions. That was almost worse than the original incident," I admitted. "The gaslighting, the attempt to make me look unstable. If your father hadn't spoken up, I should have been stronger," Daniel said, regret coloring his words. "I should have shut it down immediately, been more forceful in defending you. You were caught between loyalty to your wife and a lifetime of conditioning from your mother and sister," I acknowledged. "That's a difficult position." "Not anymore," he said firmly. "I've made my choice, Rachel. You, us, our marriage. If Mom and Vanessa can respect that and change their behavior, great. If not, we'll need to create distance." The conviction in his voice was reassuring, but I remained cautious. It's easy to say that now, in the aftermath of everything that's happened. But patterns are hard to break. What happens the next time Patricia manipulates a situation or Vanessa crosses a line? Daniel considered the question seriously. "We establish consequences and follow through. Maybe that means leaving family gatherings if boundaries are violated. Maybe it means periods of no contact if the behavior continues. Whatever it takes to protect our relationship." "And you'd be okay with that? Potentially limiting contact with your family?" "I'd rather have a healthy, limited relationship than a toxic, constant one," he said simply. "I love my family, Rachel. But what I've realized these past few days is that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. It's enmeshment, codependence." His words resonated with a truth I hadn't been able to articulate. The Wilson family dynamic had always troubled me, but I'd struggled to pinpoint exactly why. Daniel had just named it perfectly. "When did you get so insightful?" I asked, a small smile tugging at my lips. He laughed softly. "Apparently, it takes a family crisis of epic proportions to knock some sense into me." I reached for his hand, interlacing our fingers. It was a small gesture but significant, the first time I'd initiated contact since the night of our anniversary party. "I'm not saying it will be easy," I warned. "Changing these dynamics, standing up to Patricia consistently, it's going to be challenging." "I know," he agreed, "but you're worth it. We're worth it." We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire and processing the events of the day. It felt like the first real moment of peace we'd experienced since everything had unraveled. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. Looking at each other in confusion, who would be visiting at this hour? Daniel rose to answer it. Nathan stood on the porch, his expression somber. "Sorry to disturb you," he said. "I checked into a hotel in town, but I couldn't sleep. I need to talk to Vanessa." Daniel hesitated. "She's probably asleep." "It's important," Nathan insisted. "Please." I joined Daniel at the door. "What's this about, Nathan?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've had time to think about everything. I'm still angry about the lies, about this whole situation, but—" He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I love her, despite everything, and walking away without a real conversation seems cowardly." I studied him, noting the conflicted emotions playing across his face. Part of me wanted to protect Vanessa from further pain, which was ironic given everything she'd done. But another part recognized that Nathan deserved closure at the very least. "I'll go see if she's awake," I offered, surprising both men. Daniel caught my arm gently. "Are you sure? After everything she's done?" "I'm not doing it for her," I clarified. "I'm doing it for Nathan. He deserves a chance to say his piece, whatever that might be." I made my way down the hallway to the Pine Suite, knocking softly on the door. When there was no response, I knocked again, a bit louder. Finally, Vanessa's voice came through the kiai door, thick with sleep or perhaps tears. "Go away." "Vanessa, it's Rachel. Nathan is here. He wants to talk to you." Silence, then the sound of movement. The door opened a crack, revealing Vanessa's face, stripped of makeup and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "Nathan's here?" she asked, disbelief evident in her tone. "Why?" "He said he needed to talk to you, that walking away without a real conversation felt wrong." Hope flared briefly in her eyes before caution tamped it down. "Is he still angry?" "Yes," I said honestly. "But he also said he loves you. Take that for what it's worth." Vanessa nodded, closing the door to dress. A minute later, she emerged in jeans and a sweater, her hair hastily pulled back. "Where is he?" "In the living room with Daniel." She hesitated, then asked in an uncharacteristically small voice, "Will you come with me?" The request surprised me. "You want me there?" "I don't deserve your support," she acknowledged. "But I'm afraid of what he might say. Having you there would help somehow." The vulnerability in her admission was striking. Despite everything she had done, I found myself nodding. "Okay, but I'm not taking sides or intervening. This is between you and Nathan." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you." We walked to the living room together, an unlikely alliance formed in the aftermath of crisis. Nathan stood when he saw Vanessa, his expression a complex mixture of anger, hurt, and lingering affection. "Vanessa," he said simply. "Nathan," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came back." "To talk," he clarified. "Just talk." Daniel caught my eye, silently asking if I wanted to leave them alone. I shook my head slightly. I'd promised Vanessa my presence, strange as that felt. Nathan paced the room, gathering his thoughts. "I've spent the whole day trying to understand why you would do this. Lie to me about where you were, participate in a scheme to undermine your brother's marriage, behave inappropriately with him." He shook his head, disbelief evident in his expression. "It's so far from the woman I thought I knew." Vanessa sank onto the couch, her composure crumbling. "I don't have a good explanation. I was jealous of Rachel and Daniel's relationship. I was feeling insecure about us, about whether you still wanted me. I let Mom manipulate me into thinking." Her plan made sense. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "None of those are excuses. What I did was wrong, and I hurt everyone involved, including you. Especially you." Nathan stopped pacing, studying her. "Do you love me, Vanessa? Really love me? Or am I just convenient, a status symbol, someone to fill the emptiness?" The brutally direct question seemed to catch Vanessa off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it, actually considering her answer rather than responding with her usual practiced charm. "I do love you," she said finally, "but I don't think I've been very good at showing it. I've been selfish, thinking about what you could do for me rather than what I could give to our relationship." Nathan's expression softened slightly at her honesty. "That's the most self-aware thing I've ever heard you say." A ghost of a smile flickered across Vanessa's tear-stained face. "Apparently, it takes losing everything to gain a little perspective." Nathan moved to sit beside her, maintaining some distance but no longer standing apart. I don't know if we can fix this, Vanessa. The trust is broken, but I'm willing to try couples counseling if you are. Real counseling, not whatever manipulated version your mother arranged here. Hope bloomed in Vanessa's eyes. You'd give me another chance? After everything? A chance to see if we can rebuild, Nathan clarified. No guarantees. And there would need to be changes. Real, consistent changes in how you handle conflict, how you relate to your family, how transparent you are with me. Vanessa nodded eagerly. Anything. I'll do anything, Nathan. I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you're willing to try, so am I. Daniel and I exchanged glances, both clearly uncomfortable witnessing such a private moment, but also recognizing its significance. This was Vanessa stripped of pretense and manipulation, facing the consequences of her actions and making what appeared to be genuine commitments to change. Nathan stood, extending his hand to Vanessa. Let's go for a walk. We have a lot to talk about, and I think your brother and sister-in-law deserve some privacy. As they left, hand in hand, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Hope that Vanessa might genuinely be capable of change, concern that Nathan might be setting himself up for more pain, relief that a resolution seemed possible. What do you think? Daniel asked as the door closed behind them. Is she sincere? I considered the question carefully. I think so. She seemed genuinely remorseful, not just sorry she got caught. But real change takes time and consistent effort. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. The same goes for Mom. One emotional dinner conversation doesn't erase years of manipulative behavior. No, I agreed, but it's a start. And seeing Vanessa take responsibility might influence Patricia as well. We settled back onto the couch, the fire now reduced to glowing embers. The events of the day had been exhausting, but also cathartic, bringing long-buried issues into the light where they could finally be addressed. I keep thinking about what Grace said, Daniel mused, about setting clear boundaries and enforcing them consistently. That's going to be the hardest part, especially for me. Why especially for you? He smiled ruefully. Because I'm the peacekeeper, remember? The one who smooths things over, who keeps everyone happy at the expense of my own needs. I've been doing it for so long, I'm not sure I know how to stop. You stood your ground today, I pointed out. With both your mother and Vanessa, that's a significant step. It felt terrifying, he admitted, but also right. Like I was finally being honest instead of just placating everyone. I leaned against him, taking comfort in his solid presence despite everything we'd been through. We'll work on it together, setting boundaries, enforcing them, supporting each other when it gets difficult. He wrapped an arm around me, the familiar gesture feeling both strange and welcome after the emotional distance of the past few days. Together, he echoed. I like the sound of that. Morning dawned clear and cool, sunlight sparkling on the lake as I stepped onto the cabin's small porch with a cup of coffee. Mom was already up, working on a crossword puzzle at the rustic, wooden table. You look better, she observed, studying my face. Less burdened. I settled into the chair beside her, breathing in the scent of pine and freshly brewed coffee. It feels like we've turned a corner. Not that everything is fixed, but at least we're dealing with reality now, not with manipulation and denial. Mom nodded thoughtfully. Patricia and Vanessa taking responsibility for their actions is significant. Whether that translates to lasting change remains to be seen. I know, I acknowledged. I'm cautiously optimistic, not naively trusting. A wise approach, she approved. And Daniel, where do things stand with you two? I sipped my coffee, considering the question. We're committed to working through this together, setting boundaries with his family, rebuilding our trust in each other. It won't be easy, but I think our foundation is stronger than I realized. Mom reached over to squeeze my hand. I'm proud of you, Rachel. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to placate everyone or simply walk away. That takes courage. A car door slamming drew our attention to the main lodge, where Nathan was helping Vanessa with her suitcase. She looked different somehow, simpler, less artificially polished, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail and her face free of heavy makeup. Daniel emerged from the lodge, followed by Patricia and Robert. The family stood talking for a few minutes, their body language suggesting a tentative truce rather than the usual Wilson family performance of perfect harmony. Looks like departures are happening, Mom observed. Should we join them? I nodded, finishing my coffee. It's time to go home and start figuring out what our new normal looks like. As we approached the lodge, Patricia broke away from the group, walking toward us with uncharacteristic hesitation in her steps. She'd clearly made an effort with her appearance, but there was a new authenticity to her demeanor. Less rigid control, more genuine presence. Rachel, she said, stopping in front of me. Before you leave, I wanted to apologize again. My behavior has been inexcusable. I allowed my fear of losing my place in Daniel's life to override my responsibility to welcome you properly into our family. The sincerity in her voice was striking. Thank you, Patricia, I replied. I appreciate that. She glanced at my mother, a hint of her old discomfort evident. Diane, I owe you an apology as well. My attempts to exclude you this weekend were shameful. Mom nodded, accepting the apology with grace. We both want what's best for our children. Patricia, perhaps moving forward we can find common ground in that. A tentative smile crossed Patricia's face. I'd like that. As we joined the others, Vanessa approached, Nathan hovering protectively nearby. We're heading back to town, she explained. Nathan has agreed to give our relationship another chance, with professional counseling. I'm glad, I said sincerely. I hope it works out for both of you. Vanessa hesitated, then added quietly, I meant what I said last night, Rachel. I am sorry for everything. The way I've treated you. What happened at the anniversary party. All of it. I know, I assured her. And while it will take time to rebuild trust, I believe you're sincere. Relief flooded her features. Thank you. That means more than you know. As Nathan and Vanessa departed, followed by Patricia and Robert in their separate car, Daniel and I stood with my mother, watching the caravan disappear down the resort's driveway. Well, Daniel said, a hint of wonder in his voice. I never thought I'd see the day when both Mom and Vanessa would genuinely apologize for anything. Small miracles, Mom quipped, but her tone was kind rather than sarcastic. We packed our own cars in comfortable silence, the emotional exhaustion of the weekend beginning to lift as we prepared to return to normal life. Yet I knew that normal had been permanently altered by the events of the past few days. The Wilson family would never be the same, and that was probably for the best. As we pulled away from Cedar Lake Resort, I glanced in my rearview mirror, at the peaceful setting that had witnessed such dramatic confrontations. The place itself seemed transformed in my perception, no longer the site of a manipulative trap, but rather the ground zero of a necessary upheaval, the birthplace of a more authentic family dynamic. Daniel followed behind in his car, having insisted on driving separately so I could have space to process everything with my mother. The consideration reflected his growing understanding of boundaries and respect, small signs of the change already taking root. Do you think they'll actually change? Mom asked as we merged onto the highway toward Riverside. Patricia and Vanessa? I considered the question, watching the scenery pass. I think they want to. Whether they can sustain it when challenged, when old patterns reassert themselves, that remains to be seen. And if they can't? Then Daniel and I will enforce the boundaries we've discussed. Distance if necessary, limited contact if that's what it takes to protect our relationship." Mom nodded, satisfied with my answer. "You know I'm here for you, whatever happens next." "I know," I said, gratitude warming my voice. "I couldn't have gotten through this without you." As we drove toward home, I felt a sense of anticipation replacing the dread that had consumed me since the night of our anniversary party. The road ahead would not be easy. Rebuilding trust never is. But for the first time in days, I believed it was possible. My sister-in-law had tried to seduce my husband at our anniversary party, and my response the next morning had indeed left the family divided. But perhaps that division was necessary, a breaking apart to allow something healthier to form in its place. Only time would tell if the fragile new understanding could withstand the pressures of old habits and ingrained patterns. But for now, driving toward home with the sun warming my face through the windshield, I allowed myself to hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to begin again. 3 weeks after the tumultuous weekend at Cedar Lake Resort, I sat at my desk at Horizon Marketing Agency, reviewing campaign proposals for our newest client. The familiar rhythm of work had been a welcome return to normalcy, though normal had taken on a new definition in the aftermath of everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Dinner tonight at 7? I'm cooking." I smiled, typing back a quick affirmative response. We'd been taking things slowly, rebuilding our connection through small, deliberate acts of care. Some nights, Daniel stayed at our apartment. Other nights, he gave me space, sleeping in the guest room or occasionally at his friend Tyler's place. The arrangement had raised eyebrows among our friends, but it felt right for us. A mindful reconstruction, rather than a hasty papering over of cracks. "How's it going with Daniel?" Olivia asked, perching on the edge of my desk with 2 coffee cups in hand. She offered one to me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Better," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "We're talking more honestly than we ever have before, about his family, about our boundaries, about what we both need to feel secure." Olivia nodded approvingly. "And the Wicked Witch of Riverside? Any more attempts at manipulation?" I laughed at her nickname for Patricia. "Actually, she's been different. She calls instead of just showing up unannounced. She asks questions about my work instead of making passive-aggressive comments about my hours. She's even suggested lunch, just the 2 of us." "And you agreed to that?" Olivia looked skeptical. "I did," I confirmed. "We're meeting tomorrow. I'm cautiously optimistic, but also prepared for old patterns to resurface." "And Vanessa? Any more seduction attempts at family gatherings?" The question was laced with humor, but I could see the genuine concern beneath it. "She and Nathan are in couples counseling," I explained. "We've seen them twice for dinner. It's still awkward, but she seems genuinely committed to changing her behavior. She's even looking for a therapist of her own, independent of the couple's counseling." Olivia raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself. "Sounds like your dramatic response the morning after the anniversary party really did shake things up." "Sometimes a family needs to break apart before it can heal properly," I mused, thinking of Grace's words during our weekend at Cedar Lake. "Like a bone that's been set wrong. It hurts to re-break it, but it's the only way to make it stronger in the long run." Later that evening, I arrived home to find Daniel in the kitchen, music playing softly as he chopped vegetables for a stir-fry. The domesticity of the scene tugged at my heart. This was what I had missed most during our brief separation, the simple comfort of shared space and routine. "How was your day?" he asked, leaning over for a quick kiss as I set down my bag. "Productive. We landed the Westridge account." I moved to the refrigerator, pouring myself a glass of water. "How about you? How was the meeting with your father?" Daniel's face lit up with excitement. "Better than expected. Dad's serious about the consulting firm. He's already found office space and has 2 potential clients lined up. Robert's decision? To retire from his corporate position and start his own consulting business had surprised everyone. Everyone except Patricia, who had apparently seen it coming for years. "Your father has been talking about this since he turned 50, she had revealed during a family dinner. "I never thought he'd actually do it, but I'm glad he has." "That's fantastic," I said sincerely. "He seems happier already, more energized." "He is, and get this. He wants my help with the business plan, says my financial expertise would be valuable." The pride in Daniel's voice was unmistakable. His relationship with his father had deepened significantly since their united stand against Patricia and Vanessa's manipulations. It was one of the unexpected positive outcomes of our family crisis. "That's a wonderful opportunity," I said, moving to help with dinner preparations. "Are you going to do it?" Daniel nodded. "I think so. It would be part-time at first, while I maintain my position at Pinnacle. But eventually, if things go well, it could become a family business," I finished for him. "Daniel, that's perfect for you both." As we worked together in comfortable synchrony, I reflected on how far we'd come in just 3 weeks. The betrayal I'd felt at our anniversary party hadn't magically disappeared, but it had been contextualized by greater understanding and overshadowed by Daniel's consistent efforts to rebuild trust. After dinner, we settled on the couch, a familiar routine that now carried deeper meaning. Daniel hesitated before speaking, his expression turning serious. "I had a call from Vanessa today," he began. "She and Nathan have set a date for their wedding. It's going to be small, just family and close friends. She wanted to make sure we knew that things will be different this time." I nodded, processing this development. "Do you believe her?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "I think I do. She sounded different, humbler, more self-aware. She specifically mentioned that she's working through her issues with her therapist, including her inappropriate attachment to me and her competitive feelings toward you." "That's significant," I acknowledged. "The fact that she can name those issues shows real progress." "She also said something else that surprised me," Daniel continued. "She thanked me for not giving up on her, even when she was at her worst. Said it gave her hope that she could actually change." I squeezed his hand. "You never gave up on her, but you also stopped enabling her. That's an important distinction." "I'm learning," he said with a small smile. "Boundaries without abandonment. It's a delicate balance." The next day, I met Patricia for lunch at a small cafe downtown. She was already seated when I arrived, looking elegant as always, but somehow softer around the edges, less rigidly perfect. "Rachel, thank you for coming," she said, rising to greet me with a brief hug, another change from her usual formal handshake or air kiss. "Thanks for the invitation," I replied, settling across from her. "This is a nice place." "Robert and I had our first date here, if you can believe it," Patricia revealed, a nostalgic smile playing at her lips. 42 years ago. It was a bookstore then, with a tiny cafe in the back." This glimpse into her personal history felt significant. Patricia rarely shared anything that might humanize her or make her appear sentimental. After we ordered, she folded her hands on the table, her expression turning serious. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Cedar Lake," she began. "About my behavior, about the way I've treated you, about my relationships with Daniel and Vanessa." "I appreciate that," I said cautiously. "I've started seeing someone," she continued. "A therapist," she clarified quickly, noting my momentary confusion. "Dr. Winters was clearly not the right fit," she added with a wry smile, acknowledging her earlier manipulation. "That's wonderful, Patricia," I said, genuinely surprised but pleased. "It's not easy," she admitted. "Examining patterns established over decades, confronting uncomfortable truths about my motivations and fears. But it's necessary. She paused, meeting my eyes directly. I've been controlling and manipulative. I've undermined your marriage because I was afraid of losing my influence over Daniel. I've enabled Vanessa's worst impulses because it was easier than setting proper boundaries. The directness of her self-assessment took my breath away. That's a lot of insight in just 3 weeks, I observed. When your entire family stands united against your behavior, it creates a powerful incentive for self-reflection, she said dryly. But in truth, I've known there was something wrong for years. I just didn't want to face it. Our meals arrived, providing a momentary respite from the intensity of the conversation. As we began to eat, Patricia continued, I don't expect immediate forgiveness, Rachel, or even trust. Those need to be earned over time through consistent action. But I am committed to changing my relationship with you, with Daniel, with Vanessa. I want to be a mother and mother-in-law who supports rather than undermines, who respects boundaries rather than ignoring them. I appreciate your honesty, I said, choosing my words carefully. And I'm open to building a healthier relationship. But as you said, trust will take time. Patricia nodded, acceptance in her eyes rather than the defensive anger I might have expected 3 weeks ago. That's fair. I'm prepared to do the work, however long it takes. As lunch progressed, our conversation shifted to lighter topics. Patricia's charity work, my latest marketing campaign, a book we'd both recently read. It felt different from our previous interactions, less like a performance and more like an actual connection between two women trying to find common ground. When the check came, Patricia reached for it, but I placed my hand on hers. Let's split it, I suggested. Equals. A smile touched her lips, understanding dawning in her eyes. Equals, she agreed. I'd like that. That evening, as Daniel and I prepared for bed, I recounted my lunch with Patricia, still somewhat amazed by the transformation I had witnessed. Do you think it's genuine? Daniel asked, his tone curious rather than doubtful. I do, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. She's different, not completely changed, that would be unrealistic, but genuinely trying to examine her behavior and make amends. Mom in therapy, Daniel mused, shaking his head in wonder. If you'd suggested that a month ago, I would have laughed. Sometimes it takes a crisis to break through long-standing denial, I observed, sliding into bed beside him. The question is whether these changes will stick when they're tested. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. I guess we'll find out at Dad's retirement party next weekend. The whole family together for the first time since Cedar Lake. The prospect of facing the entire Wilson clan again sent a flutter of anxiety through me, despite the progress that had been made. It will certainly be a test, I agreed. But we'll face it together, Daniel said, taking my hand in his. Clear boundaries, open communication, united front. United front, I echoed, squeezing his hand. The phrase had become something of a mantra for us, a reminder that whatever challenges Patricia and Vanessa might present, Daniel and I would stand together rather than allowing ourselves to be divided. The day of Robert's retirement party arrived with perfect spring weather, sunny and mild with a gentle breeze. Patricia had arranged for the celebration to be held at the Wilson family home, but with professional catering rather than attempting to manage everything herself. Another small but significant change from her usual need for total control. Ready for this? Daniel asked as we pulled into the driveway, already half filled with guests' cars. I took a deep breath, centering myself. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, if anyone crosses a line, Mom, Vanessa, anyone, we leave. No excuses, no second chances. We've been clear about our boundaries. I nodded, appreciating his proactive stance. Agreed, but let's try to stay positive. This is your Father's Day, after all. Inside, the house was transformed. Flowers everywhere, champagne flowing, gentle jazz playing in the background. Robert stood in the center of the living room, looking happier and more relaxed than I'd ever seen him, receiving congratulations from colleagues and friends. Patricia approached as we entered, elegant in a pale blue dress that softened her usual, severe style. "Daniel, Rachel, I'm so glad you're here," she said, the warmth in her voice sounding genuine. "Your father has been asking for you." "The place looks beautiful, Mom," Daniel commented, glancing around at the tasteful decorations. "Thank you, dear. I had help, professional help," she added with a self-deprecating smile. "I'm learning to delegate rather than trying to control every detail." "It's working," I said sincerely. "Everything is lovely." As Patricia excused herself to greet new arrivals, Daniel and I exchanged glances, both noting the absence of passive-aggressive comments or subtle digs. It was a promising start. We made our way to Robert, who enveloped first Daniel, then me in warm embraces. "The guests of honor," he proclaimed cheerfully. "Well, after me, of course." "Congratulations, Dad," Daniel said, genuine pride in his voice. "You've earned this celebration." "Indeed you have," I agreed. "And I hear the consulting firm is already taking shape." Robert's eyes lit up. "Daniel's been telling you about our plans." "Yes, it's coming along splendidly. In fact, I was hoping to steal him away for a few minutes to discuss a potential client who just called this morning." As they moved to Robert's study for a private conversation, I found myself momentarily alone, taking in the gathering. Familiar faces from previous Wilson family events mingled with Robert's corporate colleagues, the atmosphere noticeably more relaxed than the usual Wilson formal affairs. "Rachel." Vanessa's voice came from behind me, lacking its usual sharp edge. I turned to find her approaching with Nathan, their hands clasped together. She looked different, her makeup subtle, her clothing elegant but understated, lacking the overtly sexual style she had favored at our anniversary party. "Vanessa, Nathan," I greeted them, bracing myself for potential awkwardness. "It's good to see you both." "You too," Nathan said warmly, extending his free hand. "How have you been?" "Good," I replied, pleasantly surprised by the genuine interest in his tone. "Busy with work, but good. And you two? How are the wedding plans coming along?" A soft smile transformed Vanessa's face. "Coming along well. Actually, that's partly why I wanted to talk to you." She glanced at Nathan, who nodded encouragingly. "I was hoping you might consider being one of my bridesmaids." The request was so unexpected that for a moment I thought I had misheard. "Your bridesmaid?" Vanessa nodded, a hint of vulnerability in her expression. "I know it's a lot to ask, after everything, and I completely understand if you're not comfortable with it, but I'd like you to be part of our day, if you're willing." I studied her, looking for signs of the old manipulative Vanessa, the calculated charm, the hidden agenda. Instead, I saw only nervous sincerity, a woman attempting to rebuild bridges she had nearly destroyed. "I'm honored by the invitation," I said carefully. "But may I ask why? Why me, given our history?" Nathan squeezed Vanessa's hand supportively as she took a deep breath. "Because you're family," she said simply. "And because you showed me more grace than I deserved. After what happened at your anniversary party, after how I behaved at Cedar. You would have been justified in cutting me out of your life completely. Instead, you gave me a chance to make amends. That means something to me." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. I glanced at Nathan, whose expression confirmed that this wasn't some performance for his benefit. "I'd be happy to be your bridesmaid," I found myself saying, the decision feeling right despite its unexpectedness. "Thank you for asking me." Relief and genuine pleasure lit up Vanessa's face. "Thank you, Rachel. It means more than you know." As they moved on to greet other guests, Daniel returned to my side, noticing my slightly dazed expression. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not exactly," I replied, still processing what had just happened. "Vanessa just asked me to be a bridesmaid in her wedding." Daniel's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "She what? And you said?" "I said yes," I admitted, watching his reaction carefully. It felt like the right response. She seems genuinely different. Daniel, not perfect, not completely transformed, but sincerely trying to change. He nodded slowly, considering this development. "I noticed it too, when I spoke with her earlier. There's a new authenticity to her. Less performance, more genuine presence." He smiled, slipping an arm around my waist. "You being in her wedding party? That's unexpected, but kind of perfect, actually. A symbol of new beginnings." The party continued, a warm celebration of Robert's career and the new chapter he was beginning. I found myself relaxing as the hours passed, noticing small but significant changes in the Wilson family dynamic. Patricia delegating tasks rather than micromanaging every detail. Vanessa engaging in conversations without making herself the center of attention. Robert and Daniel openly discussing their new business venture, their mutual respect evident in every interaction. As the event wound down and guests began to depart, Patricia gathered the family in the kitchen, away from the remaining attendees. "I want to thank all of you," she said, her composure momentarily slipping to reveal genuine emotion. "Today was perfect, and it's because we worked together, respected each other's contributions, and focused on celebrating Robert rather than other agendas." She looked directly at me as she continued, "I know we have a long way to go to rebuild what was damaged, but I'm grateful for this day, for the chance to start creating a healthier family dynamic." Robert moved to stand beside her, placing an arm around her shoulders. "It's a new chapter for all of us," he said, looking around at our small family circle, Daniel and me, Vanessa and Nathan, Patricia and himself. "In my business and in our relationships, I couldn't ask for a better retirement gift than seeing all of you here, together, moving forward instead of clinging to old patterns." We raised our glasses in a final toast, the moment feeling significant. Not an ending, but a transition, a turning point in the Wilson family story. Later that night, as Daniel and I prepared for bed in our own apartment, a sense of peaceful completion settled over me. The journey that had begun so painfully at our anniversary party had led us through difficult confrontations and painful revelations, but had ultimately resulted in unexpected growth and healing. "I've been thinking," Daniel said as we lay in the darkness, his voice thoughtful. "If someone had told me a month ago that my mother would be in therapy, that Vanessa would ask you to be in her wedding, that Dad and I would be starting a business together, I would have said they were crazy. It's remarkable how much has changed," I agreed, "and yet looking back it all feels somehow inevitable. Like the anniversary party incident was just the catalyst for changes that needed to happen anyway." Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering this perspective. "You know, you're right. The problems were always there. Mom's controlling behavior, Vanessa's inappropriate boundaries, my tendency to keep the peace at any cost. We just covered them up with politeness and denial." "And now?" I prompted, curious about his perception of our current reality. "Now, we're dealing with the truth. It's harder in some ways, more uncomfortable, but also more honest, more authentic." He turned to face me in the darkness, his hand finding mine. "I feel like I can breathe more deeply, if that makes sense. Like I've been carrying this weight of family expectations and patterns for so long that I stopped noticing how heavy it was until it started to lift." I understood exactly what he meant. "I feel it too. Not just with your family, but between us. There's a new honesty in our relationship." "Speaking of honesty," Daniel said, his tone shifting slightly, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." I propped myself up on one elbow, intrigued by the sudden nervousness in his voice. "What is it?" He sat up, switching on the bedside lamp, his expression serious but warm. "After everything we've been through these past weeks, I've been thinking a lot about us, about our marriage, our future, the foundation we're rebuilding." "Me too," I said cautiously, unsure where this was heading. Daniel reached into his nightstand drawer, retrieving a small velvet box that made my breath catch. Opening it, he revealed a delicate ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. Nothing like the large solitaire he had proposed with years ago. "This isn't a new engagement ring," he clarified, seeing my confusion. "It's a renewal, a symbol of the marriage we're creating now, which is different from the one we started with. Deeper, more honest, more resilient." Tears pricked at my eyes as I understood what he was offering. Not a return to our past, but a commitment to our future, with all the wisdom and growth our recent trials had brought. "Rachel Wilson," Daniel said softly, "will you continue this journey with me? Will you build this new version of us, with clearer boundaries, braver communication, and a deeper understanding of what it means to be partners?" I took the ring from its box, its weight both familiar and new in my palm. "Yes," I whispered, slipping it onto my right hand, a compliment to my wedding band, not a replacement. "Yes, I will." As Daniel drew me into his arms, I reflected on the strange, painful, transformative path that had led us to this moment. My sister-in-law had tried to seduce my husband at our anniversary party, and my response the next morning had indeed left the family divided. But from that division had come growth. From that conflict had emerged clarity. From that crisis had been born a chance for genuine healing. The future would bring new challenges, no doubt. Patricia and Vanessa's transformations would be tested. Old patterns would attempt to reassert themselves. Boundaries would need to be reinforced. But for the first time since that devastating night at the terrace, I felt completely confident that Daniel and I would face whatever came next with honest communication, mutual respect, and an unshakable united front. As we drifted toward sleep, the pearl ring catching the faint moonlight filtering through our curtains, I realized that the most unexpected outcome of this family crisis had been my own transformation. I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a clarity about my own worth and what I deserved in my relationships. I had learned to stand my ground without becoming bitter, to enforce boundaries without burning bridges, to allow for change without abandoning caution. The Wilson family had been forever altered by what had transpired over these past weeks, but so had I. And as I closed my eyes, Daniel's steady breathing beside me a reminder of what we had nearly lost and fiercely reclaimed, I welcomed the person I had become through this trial by fire. Stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and ultimately, more authentically myself than I had ever been before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.